Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Tanks with the mighty Jingles, and welcome back to an old friend. Everybody's favourite party tank, the TOG 2. The tank that we would all love to tell you a joke about, but it's too long. The tank that is so monumentally, mind-bogglingly slow that it can't even win a race against a Mark 7 Churchill. Yep. It's a shame, really, because the TOG is a shy, sensitive tank. TOG doesn't like having people make jokes about its length or its weight. TOG may be big-boned, but TOG is definitely not thick-skinned. Oh god, that one was terrible. I'm so sorry. Yes, well, anyway. As I'm sure you all know, TOG is not a solitary creature by nature. TOG is in fact a herd animal, and the fabulously well-named Sexy Noodle Dragon, who is driving our TOG for us today, is well aware of this fact. Fortunately for Sexy Noodle Dragon and her TOG, she is not the only TOG on the team. She's not even the only TOG in this battle. There is a TOG on the enemy team. And this makes TOG sad, because TOG is a friendly tank, and TOG does not enjoy inflicting harm on other TOGs. In fact, the only thing that makes TOG more unhappy than having to shoot at other TOGs is when TOG forms a battlefield platoon with the other TOG on the team, and then the other TOG on the team accepts and promptly goes driving off in the other direction. This makes TOG very unhappy. TOG is a herd animal after all. Nothing gives TOG more pleasure than the company of other TOGs, and so Sexy Noodle Dragon has turned her TOG around, desperate to link up with the rest of the herd. Now, as I'm sure you're all probably quite aware, TOGs are gentle creatures and quite slow to anger. But if you do want to upset a TOG very, very quickly, nothing causes a TOG more distress than seeing other TOGs getting shot at by those dastardly enemy tanks. So Sexy Noodle Dragon's TOG, seeing the rest of the herd in danger, rushes across the battle. Well, okay, it doesn't really rush across the battlefield, it's a TOG. TOGs don't do anything in a hurry. Takes a sort of leisurely stroll across the battlefield in the direction of the other member of the herd. Although the other member of the herd is doing reasonably well for itself, and this makes TOG happy. Although, to be completely fair, TOG is such a good-natured soul that it's not really difficult to make TOG happy. What is difficult, however, is keeping this commentary going for as long as it's going to take for Sexy Noodle Dragon to actually get involved in the fight. TOG is rather slow after all, and it didn't help that Sexy Noodle Dragon headed one way, then thought better of it, turned around and is now driving in the complete opposite direction, so it's going to be a while before she actually gets something to shoot at. In the interests of complete transparency, I should probably come clean at this point and just let you know in advance that this is not going to be one of those games where the TOG crushes its enemies under its 70-ton weight, drives them before her, and hears the lamentation of their repair crews. This is not that kind of game, but it is very, very definitely a TOG game. What do you mean by that, Jingles? Well, let's just say that if Sexy Noodle Dragon had been driving any other tank in this battle, absolutely anything other than the TOG 2, this would not have ended up working out the way it does. Because there are things in a World of Tanks match that you can only do if you're in a TOG 2. And there are things in a World of Tanks match that can only be done to you if you're in a TOG 2. And I realise that my having said that may have taken some of your dirty little minds in directions that it's probably best not to travel. We're not talking about rolling the TOG in flour and looking for the damp spot here. Suffice to say that this is definitely going to be a memorable TOG battle, not necessarily because of the way Sexy Noodle Dragon is driving the tank in question, but because of the things that are going to happen that can only happen because Sexy Noodle Dragon is driving a TOG. And I will say no more on the subject. Oh wow, that 1 health on the T25. Now that's cutting it close. But I will say no more on the subject, lest HMS TOG drifts dangerously off course and ends up running aground off the rocky shores of Port Spoiler. And oh, there's one of the other stars of today's video, the Thunderbolt. Now, while today's battle is fairly unusual in that it's starring the TOG, and we haven't seen the TOG in quite some time, as Sexy Noodle Dragon tries to remove the Thunderbolt's concealment by blasting away the building it's hiding behind, and hey, why not when you've got as big an ammunition reserve as the TOG? you can afford to waste a round or two. But Sexy Noodle Dragon isn't stupid. She's not wasting her precious limited stock of gold ammo on removing the concealment. The Thunderbolt, however, presents us with something of a conundrum here, because he's clearly too cheap to equip a fire extinguisher, and yet he doesn't seem to have any problem slinging all of the gold around. Although I can think of a couple of reasons why he may feel that he needs to use the APCR. It does have much faster shell velocity, for example, and he is aiming at a stationary target at the side of the Empire State Building, so you can see why he might need to press 2. Or perhaps he doesn't feel that the 128mm of penetration with the standard ammunition on his 76mm gun isn't enough to deal with the TOG's 70mm of frontal hull armour. You may be able to think of more examples, but right off the top of my head, those are two perfectly viable explanations as to why he's using the practical alternative to skill and isn't necessarily just a gold spamming noob. Anyway, moving on. Oh look, it's 5 against 3. Things are going well for Sexy Noodle Dragon. 5 against 2. Things are going even better, except, yeah, no, not really. Because of the 5 surviving tanks on the team, 2 are artillery, one is a T-25 with exactly 1 health, and the other, down here, is an AFK Flat Panzer. Now, I don't know why the Flat Panzer loaded into battle, drove 30 metres and then quit. There could be any number of perfectly valid reasons to explain why that happened, none of which I really care about, because the only thing that's actually important is that he is AFK, and so is about as much use to his team as a chocolate fire god. I mean, I suppose it is possible that he may end up accidentally spotting enemy tanks that try to flank around on the eastern side of the map, but the best case scenario here is that at most he's basically going to be Belgium to the enemy team's Germany, and what I mean by that is no more than a temporary speed bump, while in the process providing a whole bunch of free credits and experience. And the worst case scenario is that he's going to be the last tank left alive on the team, in which case you can all kiss goodbye to your chances of winning this match. Meanwhile, TOG is about to see something that TOG has never seen before, because matches don't usually last long enough for TOGs to make it to the enemy cap circle, but there it is. Sadly, the T-25, who was also pushing the cap circle, got taken out by the surviving enemy Wolverine, but not before figuring out where the shot came from, which is relayed to the rest of the team, and artillery is wasting no time whatsoever in peppering the rear of that hill on the far side of the cap circle, which for the moment at least is allowing TOG to sneak up on the prize. TOG is getting very excited. TOG has never seen the cap circle before. But TOG's spider sense is also tingling, because the Wolverine isn't the only surviving enemy tank. There's also the SU-100Y, the dreaded box tank. Well, that was less than optimal, but hang on, Artie has hit box tank and blown box tank's tracks off. And with the rate of fire of this 17-pounder gun, Sexy Noodle Dragon is easily able to ensure that box tank's tracks stay off. And here's where I want to pause things and draw your attention to something very important. Now, imagine that you were not in a TOG. Imagine you were in any other tank in the game. Doesn't matter, pick a tank, any tank, and put yourself in this situation. Notice how box tank was immobilized as it was pulling back and turning into cover. Box tank's gun has a very limited traverse. Notice how box tank's gun is pointing in the wrong direction. Ha 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 ha, sucks to be you, box tank. TOG can keep you immobilized all day and finish you off at TOG's leisure. Except you're in a TOG, and even though that gun isn't actually pointing at where a normal tank would be, TOG is so long, box tank can still shoot TOG. Interesting thing about box tank: 1, it's dead, thank you Artie, and 2, its gold ammo actually has less penetration, but does more damage. Not that box tank was actually using any of the gold ammo, because he's not a gold spamming noob. The same, however, cannot be said for the Wolverine, the last surviving tank on the enemy team. A tank which, funnily enough fact fans, has exactly the same gun, with exactly the same penetration, as the other gold spamming noob on the team, the Thunderbolt. Funny how that works out. Oh look, there's the AFK Flat Panzer. Could be any number of good reasons why he or she went AFK, none of which are important. The only thing that matters is that, well, they are AFK, and therefore about as much use to the team as a solar-powered flashlight. The laissez-faire there, venting their frustrations on their completely useless teammate. Don't worry, there's no friendly fire in World of Tanks anymore. So now It's down to the 2 artillery. Except it isn't. What do you mean by that, Jingles? Well, if you're expecting the flat panzer to come to life, forget it, that's not going to happen. I don't get it, Jingles. There's only the 2 arty, the M41 and the and the AFK flat panzer. Who else can there be? Oh, yea of little faith. TOG may have contracted a fatal dose of gold poisoning, but even though TOG is dead, that does not mean that TOG cannot continue to serve Queen and country. You know, I'm reminded of what I still think is my best ever game in the TOG. And funnily enough, it was on this map. Although it was in an earlier version of this map when certain things were possible that aren't really possible now. And when I say my best game in the TOG, it was kind of like this game, in that I didn't score a huge amount of damage and get a huge amount of kills, but I did something in the TOG that you can only do in the TOG. It was at the other end of the map where there's a bridge leading into the village, up in the northeast corner. And I was in a platoon of 3 TOGs, myself, Quickie Baby, and Ike the King of Norway. We didn't exactly cover ourselves in glory. We ran into a platoon of KV2s and we all died, but before we died we ensured that we all turned sideways on and effectively blocked an entire end of the map, and then spent the rest of the game just laughing our asses off as we watched the KV2s trying, completely unsuccessfully because they didn't have the engine power and the TOG's a 70-ton tank, trying to push their way past the dead TOGs, and spent so long doing it that the rest of the team ended up popping up behind them after having killed the rest of the enemy team and took the KV2s apart one at a time. Like I said, much fun was had by all, except possibly for the drivers of the KV2 platoon. Sadly, you can't do that sort of thing here on Pearl River anymore. Clearly, people were having far too much fun, so Wargaming patched that shit out real quick. But there are still other things that you can do when there's a dead TOG around. And with just 2 minutes of this match remaining, and with very little chance of Artie being able to take out the Wolverine unless they get ridiculously lucky and manage to drop a shot straight through the open-topped turret, the M41 arrives in the cap circle and is going to try to cap it out. Now if you're sitting there thinking, M41, what are you doing? The Wolverine's behind you. Aha, not so, gentle viewer. Thanks to the absurdly overpowered view range of the Tier 5 who is sitting over here, he managed to spot the Wolverine as he attempted to either cap or hunt down and kill off the surviving tanks on TOG's team. Which means that the M41 knows that the Wolverine is in fact in front of him, and if he has any sense whatsoever, is rushing back to defend the cap as quickly as he possibly can. Which isn't particularly quick in a Wolverine, but it's definitely not slow either. Which means that in the dying seconds of this match, as the Wolverine reappears and the M41 is cowering behind the wrecked shell of TOG, TOG is able to perform one last duty for Queen and country. TOG, do you have any words to say for the audience on this fateful moment?
Even in death I still serve.
Damn right you do, TOG. Even when dead, TOG still wins. On that bombshell, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.